Welcome to the Businesstalk podcast. I'm your host Deepak from India. Today we welcome Dr. Sara Dolnicar, a fellow of the Academy of the Social Sciences in Australia, an Austrian behavioural scientist who served as a research professor of tourism at the University of Queensland in Brisbane, Australia. Dr. Sara is an internationally recognized behavioural scientist whose career has spanned 3 continents. Born in Ljubljana, Slovenia, educated in Vienna, Austria, and now based in Brisbane, Australia. She brings a distinctive cross-cultural perspective to her research. Dr. Sara's research portfolio is notably diverse and impact-focused. She has become a leading expert on Airbnb and its regulatory framework, while simultaneously advancing hospitality, sustainability in tourism, helping hotels reduce environmental footprints, and operating costs in tandem. Her work extends to consumer behavior and social marketing, particularly examining public acceptance of circular economy practices such as recycled waste products. This combination of academic rigor and practical applications has made her research particularly valuable to industry and policymakers alike. Her scholarly contributions are substantial. More than 300 peer-reviewed publications and leadership of 16 Australian Research Council grants, including prestigious Queen Elizabeth II and Laureate Fellowships. Her impact has been recognized through numerous accolades, including 2 Lifetime Achievement Awards that underscore her career guidance significance. In 2017, the US-based Travel and Tourism Research Association bestowed its Distinguished Researcher Award in recognition of her groundbreaking research that has positively shaped the tourism industry and her outstanding service to the research community. In 2016, the Republic of Slovenia honored her as an Ambassador of Science, the nation's highest recognition for expatriate researchers, acknowledging her global excellence, research impact, and knowledge transfer. Dr. Sara Dolnicar holds advanced qualifications from 2 of Austria's leading institutions. She earned a magister's degree in business administration from the Vienna University of Economics and Business, a comprehensive qualification encompassing both undergraduate and graduate level study. She completed her doctoral research at the same institution in 1996 with a dissertation titled Vacation Expectations of Summer Tourists in Austria, a psychographic taxonomy using neural network techniques, supervised by Professor Joseph Masnek. Her intellectual foundation was further strengthened by a magister's degree in psychology from the University of Vienna, completed in 1998, which deepened her expertise in behavioral science and human decision-making disciplines that would become central to her distinguished research career. In today's episode, Professor Sara Dolnicar discusses her research on the evolving landscape of peer-to-peer accommodation, exploring how sharing economy platforms challenge traditional definition of collaborative consumption and the trading of space. It's my pleasure to now welcome Dr. Sara Dolnicar to the conversation. Dr. Sara, we are deeply honored by your presence and grateful to your time with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Professor Sara, you argue that terms like sharing economy, collaborative consumption, and peer-to-peer accommodation are unsuitable descriptors for platforms like Airbnb. Can you walk us through why this widely used term missed the mark and what would be a more accurate way to describe what's actually happening on these platforms?
Well, I think really shared economy implies that, there's a partnership and everyone benefits, and that's not necessarily the case. So I prefer the term peer-to-peer economy, because what it really means is that we have ordinary people offering services to other ordinary people. So they are peers, right? And of course, there's a platform in between, but there's not terribly much sharing because it is still a commercial transaction.
Professor, when Airbnb launched in 2008, it genuinely seemed to embody the concept of sharing ordinary people renting spare rooms to other ordinary people. At what point did this shift, and what were the key turning points that transformed the platform from a sharing-oriented service into what you describe as commercial online trading?
It was always a commercial online trading. It was never free sharing. So there was no change in the business model of Airbnb. From the first moment, customers paid for accommodation. So it was an online, matching, if you want, an online matching service for beds, right? But the big transformation for Airbnb came when it was so successful that it wasn't only ordinary people offering their beds. That's where the transition really happened. So although it was always paid, in the origins of Airbnb, it was truly the back room in someone's house or a spare bed or a couch. It was paid, but it was still, if you want, very casual, right? But because Airbnb was very clever, they are a platform business and they were very successful in increasing demand and supply at the same time. And that means that the whole system, the whole platform could grow very quickly and very efficiently. And so they had real market power. And because of that market power, commercial providers of accommodation started also listing their properties on the platform. And now, many, many years later, there's a lot of there's hotels basically available on Airbnb. So it's really transformed more into an online travel agent for accommodation and experiences.
Professor, your research highlights that the number of private listing people making spare rooms available in their homes has dropped, while commercial short-term rentals have increased substantially. What does the current host landscape look like, and what are the implications of this professionalization for guests, local communities, and the original Airbnb vision?
Yeah. Well, I think it's been really interesting looking at the regulations that different countries have put in place for Airbnb. In many ways, when it was all a small phenomenon and it was ordinary people opening their rooms, there was not a huge need for regulation. But when the point came where it became really big and really commercial, that put substantial pressure on local communities. And that's where a lot of governments have started to clamp down on their regulations. And that happened kind of slowly. But right now it's happening quite radically. So in Barcelona, for example, permissions to put your property on Airbnb are literally being withdrawn. That is a massive intervention for a regulator. And why is that the case? Because it's just become too much. It's basically backfired on housing for locals. And that's the only way for the community to sort out the problems. So in many ways, Airbnb's success caused Airbnb a lot of problems in the end because its impact on communities was higher. I should say, though, that these negative impacts we always talk about with Airbnb, it's just a little bit unfair because these negative impacts happen in destinations that are already hugely popular. Where Airbnb brings huge benefits to communities is in regional, remote, rural areas. Those areas are desperate for a little bit of the economic benefits of tourism. And no hotel chain is going to build accommodation there. So, we focus on the things that happen in the classic tourist destinations. But the real power of Airbnb and peer-to-peer accommodation more broadly is to actually enable tourism to enrich regional, rural, remote communities and bring a little bit more money in terms of jobs and a stronger economy into those areas. And in those areas, there's no problem. That's all benefits, right?
Dr. Sara, the pandemic dramatically disrupted Airbnb's business with massive revenue losses and investor concerns. Your research suggests COVID-19 may lead to a partial revival of the original, more sharing-oriented concept of space trading. 2 years on from your publication, has this revival materialized or have we seen a return to the pre-pandemic trajectory?
Yeah, so my prediction was absolutely wrong. I actually predicted that commercial providers who really got burned during COVID, right? During COVID, it was almost from one day to another. People were making a lot of money on Airbnb, and suddenly the borders are closed, and suddenly there's movement restrictions. So suddenly all these short-term rentals are thrown back on the long-term market. And my prediction was that that will kind of scare commercial providers. But that didn't happen at all. The moment everything returned to normal, suppliers again saw that there's money to be made on short-term rentals. So it wasn't really the market that has regulated it, but it was in the end policymakers who had to step in and put some, how should I say, limitations around how short-term rental is permissible.
Professor, research shows that during the pandemic, travelers demonstrated preferences for entire apartments over shared rooms, rural locations over urban centers, and properties with higher price point that signal professionalism and safety. What does this behavioral shift tell us about the future of peer-to-peer accommodation and changing relationship between risk perception and booking decisions?
So I'm not sure I fully understood your question. You're saying that Airbnb got more expensive, or you're saying the gap between Airbnb and hotels was increased?
Yeah. So during the pandemic, travelers demonstrated preferences for entire apartments rather booking a shared rooms, rural locations over urban centers,
Yeah.
and properties with higher price point that signal professionalism and safety. So they first selected the safety aspect and later, selected the higher price.
Well, I think during COVID was a whole different story. I mean, during COVID, we almost can't really talk about, right? Because during COVID, we were scared to, get anywhere close to one another. So yes, during COVID, there was definitely a backlash against Airbnb because people, even within hotels, there were major behavioral changes. Suddenly, people didn't want cleaners to come into their room. Suddenly, people didn't want their minibars refilled, right? Like this was kind of a really extreme situation. But again, I can't see that behavior changes lingered. I think now you move around, even on airplanes, nobody wears masks anymore, right? So somehow we fell back into the routine that there's really no need to have any kind of separation. And the potential benefits we may have reaped from COVID in terms of environmental sustainability of tourism have pretty much not eventuated, right? We're back to mini bars, we're back to daily room cleaning, and people aren't particularly concerned about it.
Professor, you reference Habibi and colleagues sharing exchange continuum in your analysis. Can we explain where Airbnb actually sits on this spectrum and what specific characteristics, such as the absence of joint ownership, social connections, and non-monetary motivations, disqualify it from being considered true sharing?
Well, I mean, when I share, it's a pretty logical concept. When I'm sharing something with you, we will buy a meal together, and then we will each have half. So I will not pay you for my half of the meal. In the moment there is money involved, it is not sharing. It is effectively a monetary transaction. So of course the name sharing is very romantic, but it never was like that. If you want to talk about sharing, then you need to talk about businesses like couch surfing. Couchsurfing is the same model as Airbnb, but with no money changing hands. So here, genuinely, people open their couch or their bedroom or their spare bed to people. That was never Airbnb's business model. So the Airbnb's model was always a commercial transaction.
Professor, could you please let us know about your current research on sustainability tourism?
Yeah, absolutely. So what my group, the Low Harm Hedonism Initiative, is doing is we are trying to develop behavior change interventions that entice tourists to behave more sustainably. Now, it's very important that we entice them because we do not want to guilt trip them and we don't want them to feel, in any way bad. We want to have really clever approaches to how we can make them behave more sustainably. I should start by saying everyone loves tourism, but tourism actually generates nearly 9% of all carbon emissions. That's a hugely negative environmental impact. And many people say, oh, technology is going to save it. Technology is going to fix us up. But in the last 10 years, technology only reduced emissions by 0.3%, whereas tourism emissions increased every year by 3.5%. So, before we even start the conversation, it's really important for everyone to understand that tourism is a dirty business. Like tourism has a lot of negative environmental consequences. So that's why we're so passionate about trying to develop behavior change interventions.
Listeners, the next time you book on Airbnb or hear someone call it a sharing economy platform, you will know there is a much more to the story. For you are interested in exploring this further, Professor Dolnicar's research is available through the University of Queensland repository. We hope this conversation has sparked your curiosity about the technology and platform that are reshaping how we travel and live. Thank you, Professor Sara Dolnicar, for this conversation and for your continued work in making the sharing economy more transparent and accountable. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.